Welcome to Authenticity Unleashed. I'm Pam Rader, your host, and I'm here today with Mitch Calvert from Calvert Fitness. Mitch resides in wintry Winnipeg. And he has a really interesting story, and I love his take on health, wellness, fitness, and embracing imperfection. So I'm excited to dive in with Mitch today and hope to leave you with some maybe new ideas about what it is to embrace a healthy lifestyle authentically and in alignment with what matters most to you. Welcome, Mitch. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks, Pam. Excited to be here. Appreciate the invite.
So you have a transformation story, and I'm sure I'm not the first person to say this, but as I looked at your website and kind of your story, it's similar. Somebody who's very famous, Mr. David Goggins.
Mm,
I'm sure people have said that to you before.
yeah, toned down version certainly. My
Toned
childhood.
down version, like a
Yeah,
everyday Joe kind of version of that, right?
yeah,
I
yeah.
love that because as much as I admire David Goggins, I do not want to live his life.
Absolutely not. There's a lot of demons and things in his closet that I'm happy I didn't have to deal with growing up, no doubt.
Right. So, will you just tell us a little bit about how your journey got started? Weren't always and fabulous.
Yeah, fabulous is a questionable one, but certainly the fit piece came later in life. Like I was the furthest thing from a fitness person growing up. I mean, I played some casual sports hockey. Every Canadian kid has to play hockey at one point, but in those early teen years, I started to pack on the weight and mostly found satisfaction in video games and junk food. And my part-time job was in a restaurant, so that only compounded the problem by bringing home chicken fingers and fries at midnight, overeating, and worked my way up to 260 pounds in my late teens. Which, at 6'2" is sizable weight, right? And I just felt a lot like a victim at that time in life, where I blamed everyone but myself for my scenario, my situation, and it really held me back from pursuing anything until fitness was sort of that gateway drug to a completely new life for me.
So, this is a thing that we see with a lot of teenage boys playing video games as an escape. Maybe eating junk food, a lot of them smoking weed, sitting on their mom's couch. What do you think was going on underneath there? Was there insecurity? Do you feel left out? Were you bullied? Like, well, is there I sense that you're a responsibility
Mm.
guy and you're going to say it's no one's fault but your own. But I'm interested in, like, well, what was the underlying precipitator there?
Yeah, and I think that's what attracted me to video games because you can take on a completely new persona. Your avatar is like this perfectly, fit soldier of some kind, depending on the game, right?
Mhm.
And I had some demons from junior high is when it kind of started getting made fun of for my weight. I don't know if it's a family program, but Mitch Tits was my nickname at one point from a real fun classmate because I had man boobs. And so every opportunity I had to try to hide and stay away socially, the better. And video games kind of offered that alternative to still connect with people, but do it in a way where it was a bit more anonymous. You could take on the persona of someone who was my ideal version when I was the furthest
So
thing
it's like
from that.
an escape.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a lack of acceptance of yourself, fear of rejection, and then that leads to some form of escape, which actually just compounded this scenario. What was the
Yeah, because it doesn't provide the same satisfaction as pursuing things in the real world, right? Video games it's a temporary fix for sure.
That's so interesting. I am interested in that because I have four sons. A couple of them have play a lot of video games, which actually kind of I don't understand it. I
Yeah.
think there's so much great life to live and so many things that a person could experience in real life. But it's interesting how you stated that it's like you get to be somebody completely different. And so it's kind of like you get that, well, it's not kind of like you get that dopamine hit as though you
Hmm.
achieved something without ever achieving something, which means to me it would be a low level dopamine hit that you have to keep going back for more and more versus the feeling of accomplishment. That's a massive sense of, you get all the feel good chemicals and they last for a period of time. It's like a full tank of gas when you do it yourself versus $1 worth of gas in the car when you play a video game. Is that about right?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Like cheap dopamine is what I call it. Just like,
Yeah.
recreational drugs are the same, and cheap junk food and, TV programs, where we know longer lasting dopamine tends to come from pursuing our mission in life and like delayed gratification of, that's where I found the gym was super helpful, because it's not like an overnight success, but you keep showing up, you start to see validation for your efforts, and that really empowers you, right?
Yeah.
Video games, not quite the same thing.
Yeah, and I'm sticking with this topic for a moment just because I actually have a lot of clients whose husbands play video games, and
Mhm.
it's a sore spot in their marriage, and I'm really trying to, as a coach, understand, why that would be. And I heard I can't remember who it was. It may have been Tony Robbins or something, but just said that people who are stuck playing video games need a real quest in life.
Mhm.
Like get aligned with a real quest. And so you had a quest for, what was the tipping point actually? So you're 260 pounds, you're in your late teens, and then what, like some guys are just going to stay there on the couch. What changed?
Yeah, well, there's a few tipping points, I guess, but the first one was like gym class in grade 12. One of those Omron body fat devices. It was new technology at the time.
Oh no.
Very flawed. But yeah, the gym teacher is one of those guys with the mustache who was just rah rah, David Goggins style, right? And
Yeah.
he forced us all to take the device and grip it. And then he actually took the next step and physically wrote down body fat scores from first to worst among the guys in the class. And unfortunately, I was at the bottom of that list and wanted to find a hole to crawl into and bury myself in, because it was obviously quite embarrassing. So that you'd think would be negative fuel to start making some changes. It was just temporary, like 2 weeks at a time from there. I didn't quite get any traction until my brother got involved in the lifestyle. He brought on Pumping Iron, Arnold Schwarzenegger's documentary, and some weights. And just because he was doing it, I think I'm like, oh, well, I should at least give this more of a go. And never quit from that point forward. It just, for whatever reason, I got the itch. I kept going with it. It was certainly an up and down journey, but I think that was the final like trigger point that got
I
me to
love
change.
this because it speaks to two different things. Usually, for us to have any kind of transformation, meaning a change that lasts, two things have to happen. One, we have to get sick and tired of feeling the way that we feel. It has to be too painful to be there anymore. But two, our environment has to change to some degree. And you had the gift of your brother becoming interested in something that was an impact on you. And I don't think people give enough credit to, we're in this society where you can do everything from home now by yourself. But environment is everything. You have to surround yourself with people that have similar goals, not similar habits to you, similar
Mhm.
goals, better habits than you. How much did I mean, you said your brother was there, but did you admire him? Did you aspire to be like him?
I'd like to think it was that, but it was a bit of a source of jealousy too. And that's okay to
Oh,
have a bit of that negative
totally.
fuel. Like, oh, if he's bettering himself, I better try to keep up here. I'm the older brother. I gotta set a standard myself. And so I think that was the initial like negative
Yeah.
spark was, hey, wait, don't get left behind.
Yeah.
But then obviously we started to support one another and became a collaborative approach. We shared at that time an unfinished basement with our bedrooms on either side,
Yeah. Yeah.
still living with our parents, right? So we were around each other a lot, and we ended up spending more time. And the video games didn't go away completely, but we definitely, balanced out those two things a little better together.
Okay, great. And so you started on this fitness journey, started lifting weights. Now, when did you start hitting the gym and like really changing?
Yeah, I was nervous to hit the gym initially, so it was all home workouts and jogging, walking. Like I couldn't sustain a run for very long at that point, but walking and jogging for a block and seeing how long it could last. So the combination of those two was enough to get me going. Yeah, we actually got a family membership at a JCC here locally,
Yeah.
and so my parents were going. I would go and do my own thing, but at least I had someone to kind of go with
Mhm.
to get in the door. So I think that helped initially, because you're intimidated by a gym space generally.
Oh, sure. You know what?
No
I've been
way.
in fitness for over 30 years. I taught aerobics back in the day.
Yeah.
I've taught strength training classes. I was a personal trainer for a while. I have taught yoga for 25 years, owned studios, trained teachers. And if I walk into a gym today, it's so different now. Everybody's trying to grow
Mm.
their booty and everything. It's like not how I did it when, and I can feel intimidated. So I can imagine a young version of you. And, but again, it comes down to how great is it that you had this environment where your parents were going to the gym? Like those things can't be underestimated.
Yeah, like you said, the average of the five people you spend the most time with, and at that time, parents, siblings, that's a big part of your life until you move out, do your own things. So I think it had a bigger impact than I realized, is how
Yeah.
everyone was sort of getting on board with it. And I'm the type, once I commit to something, I tend to not fall off. It's like becomes almost a bit of an obsession.
Mhm.
So I parlayed that video game obsession where I was top of the game in video games, like top levels, so committed, and kind of diverted that to more healthy pursuits. And it was kind of a natural transition, in terms of commitment.
And so you get committed, you're still a young man, you get, and you start, how long did it take you to lose what you said you lost 60 pounds?
Yeah, it ended up being a little over 60 pounds within that year. So that, I should say, before that, though, the previous 2, 3 years, it was kind of up and down, lose 10, gain 10, and not really getting any traction. So I did hire a coach during that year, online coach, through the bodybuilding forums at the time, before there was apps and tracking pieces. So that helped. I kind of made a commitment to myself that I was going to have to quit playing video games if I didn't lose 50 within the year. I think that was the target I set, and kind of put that sticky note up front and center on my computer where I'd play. So that kind of kept me like reminding, okay, I'm going to lose something I really enjoy if I don't hit this goal. A bit of a reverse bet. Like there's some theory behind that now. I didn't realize at the time, but there might
Yeah,
be
yeah.
science to that. A combination of factors is what helped kind of push me through that last year there.
Do you that's interesting. Like you say, there's some science behind that, making a consequence, a self-imposed consequence. But then
Hmm.
there's the other side of that where we know that there's a value to putting a reward too, right?
Yeah.
Did you have any rewards for yourself kind of mapped out?
Yeah, we seem to lean in either of those directions, reward versus consequence. And at that time, it was kind of negative fuel. So I need like negative consequence to put in the effort. Nowadays, I'm definitely leaning more towards rewarding myself for hitting little benchmark goals along the way. But at that point, what motivated me a lot more was the negative consequence of potentially losing my beloved video games.
I love it. Okay, so you battle through 2 or 3 years, then you get an online coach, you make a commitment, you see some real results. When do you decide, hey, I think I'm onto something and I could help some people?
Yeah, I'd like to say it happened instantly, but it was a long time gap in between there. Like I pursued journalism as a career,
Mhm.
went all the way through a 4 year university degree, and then got a job as a reporter in Ontario. So I had to move for that job, physically move, and spent almost 2 years there. But this fitness thing was on the side. It's what I put all my time and effort into learning, reading about, taking online courses. So it sort of became this forcing function eventually that, okay, this is what you wake up and want to do. This journalism thing was the pursuit, the passion at one point, but you're allowed to make changes in life. And I felt like I had to make that shift eventually, or I wouldn't feel fully, fulfilled with what I was doing.
Right.
So, I went back to university during night courses. So it took time, but eventually that transition happened.
Well, I'm hearing a theme with you, which is really interesting because we live in, I heard John Maxwell describe it like this, that we live in this microwave society when actually we should be thinking about life like a crock pot. Like things take time. Everybody wants
Mhm.
everything right now. We want to skip the work. We want the hack. We want the shortcut. We want the magic bullet, if you will. And I don't know. We were chatting a little bit before about how you and I are both sort of no BS, and like all of that is bullshit. There is no shortcut to life. The hard way leads to an easy life, and the easy way leads to a hard life. That's what I think. What's your take on
Mhm.
that?
100%. And potentially, if I grew up in the TikTok world, like I was a little before all these social media apps and instant gratification and food delivery, so maybe I would have naturally grown up more geared to instant gratification. But even in video games, I'd always take the road less traveled, and the character that took longer but had a bigger reward at the end. So it
Mhm.
was sort of naturally ingrained in me. I'd like to say it was something I developed, but I think it was a combination of just more wired to pursue like the delayed gratification path, because it felt like the reward was a lot greater at the end.
Mhm.
And so I'm with you on that. There's absolutely no shortcuts in fitness or otherwise, and it's about showing up daily, and habits is really the secret,
Yeah.
changing those routines over time.
So you're this kid who's overweight and you feel like you're ashamed and you don't belong and you're doing your video games. And then to become the version of yourself you're now, it's not just about habits. You have to actually claim identity. And you kind of have to claim it before you get there. And then when people say fake it till you make it, I don't think they really understand what that means. It's really about identifying and claiming the identity of the person you want to be and then taking the actions that would lead you there until you actually become that, until you catch up to that. Is that kind of what happened?
Yeah, be it before you are it. Like that's kind
Yeah.
of my slogan is faking it is always like a temporary fix. Whereas if you actually embody that future version of yourself now in your actions and habits, you will eventually become deserving of that version you're striving for, right? You can't be the fit person without the behaviors that warrant it.
I love that. I always ask myself, what would the version of you 5 years from now tell you to do right now?
Hmm.
And I'm going through the thick of it. We're both growing businesses and I've had successful businesses, but every time I go to level up, it feels like a squeeze and it feels like, am I doing this for? Ask myself, what would the version of you 5 years from now say to do right now? And it would be just like, buck up. It's going to be okay. Been
Yeah,
through hard things. You can do hard things. It's okay.
yeah, we all bump.
Tell me about your current business, what it is that you specifically help people with. And then I want to get into like I love is how you're different than what I'm hearing. And I just want to presence this for the listeners. I am hearing so many places on, especially on Instagram and everything else. As a woman who's in like my menopausal kind of era, it's like you gotta do this and you think you know something, but you gotta do that. And I just like don't buy in. I'm a big believer in living life, embracing life, and sustainability, and like actually makes me happy in my life, and finding a balance of all things. And I think that you've done a good job incorporating that. But I want to hear about your method, what you do, and what your beliefs are.
Yeah, well, there's plenty of shades of gray in fitness. I know Shades of Gray has been tarnished by that book and movie series, but like, there's no black and white, and hard rules tend to lead to failure. I'm big on flexible from day one, like building a system that you can sustain for the rest of your life. Because if you can't sustain it for the rest of your life, it's probably not going to lead to results that are sustainable. So we do help mostly busy parents lose the belly fat in particular that happens to accumulate in middle age without the frustrating fad diets, or frankly a lot of the fitness programs that are out there that have you go in and sweat and watch your heart rate and burn calories and walk out of there or crawl out of there, frankly, having felt like you killed yourself, when really it's more striking a balance between enough movement and strength training and a diet that manages your intake. That's really the secret at all
Can I
stages of
can
life.
I ask you something about that? Because I've been seeing a lot of things, especially in light of Dr. Gabrielle Lyons, who's talking about muscle mass and all. I really like her
Mhm.
work, and lots of people in that space. They're just saying, I grew up in the '80s, and all we did was cardio. I grew up in Jane Fonda era, Mitch. We were all taught that you had to be this skinny, like your pinky
Yeah,
finger,
yeah,
and you just burn calories. And I look back at probably the many wasted thousands of hours in my life that I spent doing cardio for no reason, learning a little bit more about it now and how important strength training is, and that balance. And so I see these kind of well, I don't know if it's rude to call them this, but the juice monkeys in the gym.
yeah, yeah,
And then you see the cardio bunnies.
yeah.
And like any extreme, I think the truth lies somewhere in the middle, right?
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. And I mean, the juice monkeys are also supplementing the plan with things that lead to crazy amounts of muscle mass that can't be achieved naturally, right? So their approach is probably closer to the truth in terms of making the strength the foundation, getting stronger, building muscle, because that's going to maintain metabolism, but also your joint health and all these things that tend to become an issue in later in life. Where at the same time, your heart is important, right? You want a functioning heart. You want to be able to run up, a set of stairs and not be out of breath, panting, and red faced. So a hybrid approach, a balance of the two, seems to be the sweet spot nowadays. It's just too many people go too much in either extreme
Mhm.
based off what their priority is. But you try to have to find that balance, like anything, right?
Do you think it's
Moderation.
their priority though, or is it like fed to us through
Mm,
media and then we are indoctrinated by, say, and I'm not trying to slag on Orange Theory or what it did, you just mentioned it and it popped into my head.
mm,
We go, oh, it's supposed to look like this, and this is supposed to be healthy. And then they say, we have the solution to make you look like that and be healthy. But is that even like our agenda? Because I know for me, as I get older, I just like feeling good. I like my clothes to fit.
mm.
We all are vain enough that we want to look decent, but
Yeah,
I also
yeah.
just like to be able to get up and down and move with freedom and yeah, go outside and we have a pickleball court on our property. I like to play pickleball without feeling like I'm killing
Mhm.
myself.
Yeah.
Hike with my dogs. That's good to me, but like you should look a certain way and modifying our bodies in certain ways to fit in. How much do you think, like, I feel like what you're doing is just really different from that. It's just real.
Yeah, and a lot of that is marketing that's fed to us, and that idealized vision of what our bodies should look like. I mean, that's been ingrained in media since the dawn of time, since the invention of the TV. But, you look at the research, and certainly excess body fat to a point is harmful and puts you at higher risk for all sorts of, disease and premature death. And we don't want that. But the sweet spot for body fat for most of us is a lot higher than those images in the ads. You can have a body fat percentage in the 20 plus percent and have all these excellent blood markers and be really functional, and your cardio output is excellent. So going beyond that is really just for aesthetics, and it might not be worth the trade-offs, right? So everyone's a little bit different, and genetics are a real factor.
Yeah.
But I think the epitome of health is going to look different for all of us, and we need to kind of stop attaching it to, a six pack or whatever the visual is.
Right. Okay, so let's talk about eating. You get the sweet spot of some strength training, some, cardio. Yeah, we got to keep the heart healthy. For me, like I was saying to you earlier, I used to do yoga every single day. I tore my labrum in my hip, like 2.5 centimeter tear from overstretching for so many years.
Mhm.
I do power yoga, so it's strong, getting cardio, getting strength, but repetitive motion over years and years. It was like it's like a hockey player injury almost, like a
Yeah,
goalie,
yeah, yeah,
just
yeah.
that overstretching. I realized that after having surgery to repair that, I needed to do something different and started, yeah, I'll do 15 minutes of yoga a day, a little stretching, but I only do 2 or 3 classes a week now. And then I added in strength training and I always hike and get a little bit on my Peloton, whatever. And I found out, like, just from necessity, that feels really good in my body to do this variety of things and not even be super regimented. I don't have Tuesdays leg day. It's just
Mhm.
like, oh, hey, feels like I should do some weights. It's like intuitive. Now, you have some like ideas around intuitive eating and sustainable ways of feeding ourselves. Talk about that.
Yeah, so just like a balanced approach to exercise is probably optimal for the average person. Some people are probably trying to specialize in a sport, so that
For sure.
changes the perspective, right? But for the vast majority, if you're watching this, the same approach works well with nutrition, where you probably understand you feel better after a whole food meal. Most of the time, that's probably the best choice to fill up on the protein and produce and veggies and fruits and all that good stuff. And I think we all get that. But most people start a diet and they have this meal plan that's like, you know, oatmeal and egg whites, and a salad for lunch, chicken and quinoa, cucumber sprinkled with your own tears for dessert. Like you just can't sustain that, forever. So it's really the 80-20 rule applies nicely where you can have mostly whole food meals. Maybe you track calories just to know for sure where you need to be. But that other 20% is I don't like even calling them junk food, but like fun foods versus nutritious foods, and having that balance, it's going to be a lot more sustainable that way. And they've shown in studies groups that have a bit of flexibility, have the dessert nightly, that's nothing too crazy, but a controlled amount of something, adhere better, get better results over the long run. And I think that's what we're all missing when we start these fad diets, is thinking we have to be so structured. Then we fall off on Fridays. Oh, we'll get back on track Monday, and it becomes this vicious cycle.
Yeah, have you seen that documentary on the blue zones
Yeah.
recently? Yeah, yeah. And they're like in Sardinia, one of the islands off of Italy. I mean, these they're drinking wine and they're eating pasta every day, and they're
Mhm.
all very healthy human beings because they're enjoying there's movement, there's health, like good food. And I believe that food made with love is healthy for you.
Absolutely. The social
I'm gonna
connection.
have dessert. I don't like eating sweets. I just don't feel good. But if
Yeah,
someone makes me pie and they made it with love, I'm gonna eat
sure.
that. And I think of that as just as nutritious as anything else because someone put love into that thing.
100%. If it's your
Yeah.
grandma's special recipe and you have it every Thanksgiving, and now you're trying to restrict yourself because you're on the keto diet, I mean, that's not helping you mentally, nor is it helping you, frankly, physically, I think, in the big picture, because
Yeah.
eventually you're going to cave and binge on a whole pie. Yeah.
Yeah. You coach the 80/20 rule. I love this. I love the 80/20 rule in business too, that 80% of your revenue comes from 20% of your customers. I have found that to be true. I've got a really loyal
Hmm.
community, core people that have just stayed with me. And so I put a lot of nurture into them. But it's interesting that it works everywhere. 80% of the time, do well, and 20% of the time, let yourself live.
Yeah.
Do you have a particular eating style? There's keto, there's
Paleo,
Leo, yeah.
carnivore would be the latest one.
The
Yeah.
carnivore, my husband did the carnivore diet for a month. He lost 30
Yeah.
pounds and he loved it. He thought it was great, except he missed vegetables. So we primarily eat a lot of like protein and produce. We like
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, exactly.
But carnivore, it's not sustainable. I can't just eat meat every day.
And no, that's the challenge, right? That's the question I always ask on day one. Can I see myself doing this a year from now, 10 years from now? No, well, the weight you lose is probably going to be temporary then, right? So it has some good principles, I'm sure. Like protein and produce are obviously good things, although they take away the produce part. Right? That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. They take away the produce part. Yeah.
So fiber would be a challenge.
Yeah.
Staying regular would be a challenge in that one, I imagine.
Yeah. He did it, not me. I didn't ask. So all of these restrictive diets, why do people get so sucked into them?
I think it's the appeal, like you talked about earlier, of the fast, instant gratification, quick results. And I've yet to see fat loss work, at least quality fat loss work fast. You can lose 10 pounds in a week, but half of it's water, some of it's muscle. Like obviously that's what you want to hold on to. So it's actually better to have like a consistent pound or two per week of loss in a fat loss phase. That indicates to me that you're losing the right weight and you're preserving at least the right weight, which is, the
I don't
muscle.
think people talk that much about that, losing the right kind of weight. We just talk about losing weight. A little bit more about that. You said good fat loss versus
Yeah, well, you see some of the research with the latest class of like GLP-1 drugs, Ozempics of the world, they may have their place, and I'm hoping that people will start to implement strength training alongside them, and that might alleviate some of the muscle loss happening. But you can, in theory, lose 5 pounds and have a higher body fat percentage if 4 of those pounds are muscle, right? You're actually getting worse, even though the scale is giving you that instant gratification. Underneath the hood, potentially you're doing more damage than good, and you're going to have a nasty rebound or slow your metabolism even further. So yeah, the goal is of any fat loss plan should be to preserve, potentially gain some tone muscle, and prioritize fat loss. And the only way to really ensure that is the strength piece, strength training.
uh
And that's not those classes people think. It's
yeah.
lifting things up, putting them down, and then sufficient protein to support that muscle preservation.
Okay. Now, I think that as you're saying this, what occurs to me is that there has to be a mindset shift and maybe a really deep internal shift for us to want to do it the way that you're talking about because Ozempic and like the fast and keto, let's combine those two and see what happens, I'm sure to me other based esteem and achievement based esteem. Like if I'm worthy because other people think that I'm, fit, or I'm attractive, or and I'm worthy because I can achieve this thing, versus true self-worth, which is I'm worth treating my body well, I'm worth investing in my long-term enjoyment of life.
Mhm.
And that's something that building the habits that you're talking about actually leads to. Whereas these quick fad fixes and these, and like you say, I'm sure Ozempic has its place in society, and there are people that it's going to help a lot and all of that. I'm not knocking these things, but what I look to mindset and belief systems, and I think that when I see people wanting this quick stuff, it's like chasing that elusive carrot. Like I'll finally feel better when, in the land of later on, when I'm more attractive and fit, other people will like me, versus when I show up and do the work, I start to like myself.
Mm. Yeah,
And
powerful.
yeah. And I really feel that from you. Like you said, you had the long road mindset from the beginning. And as you went through that, would you say that you've started to like yourself?
Yeah, it's almost like, I mean, the weight loss is one piece, but not actually the bigger piece. The
Mhm.
bigger piece is like I'm putting an effort. I'm deserving of feeling better about myself because I'm working on myself. And over time, you become this upgraded version of yourself,
Mhm.
and the confidence just comes hand in hand with that, right? And I
Yeah.
definitely overlooked that. Initially, it was just about a number on the scale, and I'll feel good about myself when I'm weighing X amount of weight. And but along the journey, you become this new version, and that's what is empowering. That's what builds your confidence. It's a great way of looking at it.
Yeah, and but you're saying confidence, and I have a like a different definition of confidence, because I think confidence is the understanding that we have the ability to achieve a certain goal or perform a certain task, and confidence is situational, right? Like if like I'm super confident I can coach people, train people in whatever realms I do, but if somebody asked me to go teach someone how to throw a football, I don't have a clue. I'm not confident in that. So confidence is situational, versus self-worth
Hmm.
comes from keeping your word to yourself over and over and over again, even when it's hard. And you become someone that you can trust through that. So having a goal, when we set these goals for weight loss, I'm curious about your process. Do you get into it with people, like why do you want to lose the weight? Who is it that you want to become? Because if the purpose of a goal to me is creating the new version of myself that I'll have to become to have that goal. Because if the version of myself right now knew how to have that goal, I would already have it.
Hmm.
I'm going to have to become a different version of myself to get that. And that's really the point to me. So, do you get into that kind of mindset with people, Mitch?
Yeah, we talk about identity redesign and like from day one mindset. It's overplayed maybe, but it is a huge factor in this process. You can only give people a diet and workout plan that sticks if the space between the ears is willing to embrace those changes. And
Hmm.
yeah, it comes down to why and going a few layers beyond, unpeeling that onion until you get right to the core of what actually is driving them to want to make this change. And rarely is it to lose 20 pounds. It's to be a better role model for their kids. Maybe their mom died or they saw her health deteriorate too young. They don't want to end up with the same outcome. And so once you have that short list of whys, you have to continue to remind yourself of that when it gets tough. But that's ultimately what's going to drive people and motivate them,
Hmm.
not the superficial, surface level stuff, for
Right.
sure.
So, let's talk about what are the top three bullshit scenarios you see in the fitness industry right now?
Got
Because you're
it.
a no BS guy.
Yeah, it boils down to the basics still work best until further notice. Drinking your water, managing your calorie intake, prioritizing sleep, strength training, walking enough. If you put all your focus, all your eggs in those baskets, you'd have exceptional results. But every day on TikTok or Instagram, you see something promising a faster way through one unique tweak or change, and rarely do those do much of anything. Maybe they supplement the basics, But if the basics aren't in place, they won't stick either, right?
Mhm.
So if we had to pick and choose a few, like I would go down the rabbit hole of anyone that's suggesting you have to eat like bull testicles. There's a real subset online now where superfoods are like that looks like an animal tongue and it's still raw, and the more hardcore the better. And
Right.
there's no way anyone's going to stick with that for long, nor easily source it. So,
Right.
one, the exotic foods aren't necessary. They're
Mhm.
not going to make a huge difference. And number two would be, yeah, just the approach to exercise that people think they can burn calories and overlook the nutritional piece.
Mhm.
But we all know that the diet tends to drive the fat loss bus, assuming that's your focus. Start there, clean up your diet a bit, because there's only so much exercise you can do, especially if you're a full-time corporate boss and you've got kids. You're going to be sitting a lot throughout your day. You're not going to be able to carve out 2 hours for exercise. So why try to, do that from the start?
Right. So, do you think that I mean, I've heard this before that six packs are made with spoons, not
Mm.
in the
Hmm.
gym. They're made in the kitchen. That
Unfortunately, yeah, I've tried to do the opposite approach, and it didn't get me very far.
right.
So it wasn't until I cleaned up nutrition and tracking macros worked best for me, frankly. It's still something we'll probably start people on if they have tried it all and haven't lost weight. Typically, it's an intake issue. Like
Mhm.
their calories are higher than they realize. So getting them to actually physically document that can be a huge breakthrough, because then it
Mhm.
just teaches you what to look for in nutrition labels, how to balance out your macros, and it gives you those tools for life, right?
I hear this macros term all the time, and I have a vague idea of it being like your ratio of protein to carbohydrates to fats. Is that correct? But
That's
what
correct.
a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I actually like to boil it down a little simpler for people. We call it the CAP framework. So
Mhm.
it's just a calorie range per day and a protein range per day. And if you get within your target range for those two, we really gamify it in our app where it's the gold star if they hit it, red if they don't. We don't obsess about being perfect. But if those two variables are in place, the fats, the carbs, they can kind of balance out by
Mhm.
default because your calories are in check, right, with the target you've set. So that makes it a little easier. But yeah, it's foreign territory for a lot of people to, oh gosh, I got to balance out my carbs, my fats, my proteins. But once you get down pat and the apps do a lot of the heavy thinking for you nowadays,
Mhm.
it becomes such an empowering thing because now
So
you
you think
know.
apps are a great idea for people who are trying to embark on this journey, just for like building habits and awareness?
Yeah, it takes away a lot of the confusion because you just input what you ate. It tells you the macro breakdown, right? And at the end of the day, you get a sense for your numbers, where your numbers are today, where they should be, and you can now bridge that gap a lot more easier because the data is there and you're not guessing.
I like that. I was watching there was a reel that came up on Instagram the other day, and it's a local person who's a nutritionist who specializes in women's health or whatever. And she posted this thing, and it was like some eggs and some avocado and some tomato, and she's like, if you think this is the proper breakfast, you got another thing coming. And I'm like, but I just ate that today, like somebody else told me that was okay. and
Yeah.
and I was like a lot of shaming, and then I think people just give up because there's so many conflicting messages. Would you say it goes back to kind of the simple, like, think what you're describing is kind of how nature would have us eat anyway?
Yeah, it's more intuitive. Like if your portions are in check,
Yeah.
avocado can fit. I know some
Yeah.
people are either really pro avocado or not. It's all the doses and the poison, right? If you're
Mhm.
having 3 whole avocados a day, it's probably too much in terms of calories. But yeah, that's the beauty of it is it kind of gives you, you can throw out all the food rules, and as long as your calories are where they need to be, like the I don't know if you saw this, but there was a professor in Kansas a few years back who tried to prove the calories in, calories out equation. We know it's more complex than it sounds. He ate 1,800 calories of Twinkies per day. I think he mixed in some protein shakes just for that balance. Lost 20 pounds in 8 weeks. His
Mhm.
triglycerides improved, cholesterol improved because he lost weight, so he was
Yeah.
maybe a little overweight. And just by striking that balance of calories and protein, he was able to lose weight and improve health outcomes. And that's what I always point to when someone says, "Oh, you can't have this food because some rule," and when really that just complicates a simple equation.
Right. You hear a lot of people saying, well, that's not it. And it's so much more and everything. But I think at the end of the day, if we have the more complicated we make it, the less likely we are to adhere to anything. If we can keep it simple, variety in our workouts, variety in our foods, everything in moderation. That sounds like what my grandma said, Mitch.
Something to be said for that, honestly. Going back to how they used to eat when everyone was fairly in shape, right? Because they didn't overconsume, and certainly the world is set up to overconsume now, and we can dive into that rabbit hole with food scientists and high calorie foods on the market and all that. But at the end of the day, yeah, it is just about balancing that equation between how much calories you need to maintain your weight, how much exercise activity you need to do to kind of balance that out.
Um, I think that speaking of back in the day, when I look at like my grandparents' era, everyone just moved around naturally a lot more. Nobody went to the gym, but
Yeah.
they were sweeping their floors and hanging their sheets outside, and they were walking to the grocery store and carrying 2 bags back with them, strength training, grandma, that's how they did it. And
Hmm.
we have such a I think we're drowning in a sea of comfort
It's a
in
good way of
today's
putting
day
it.
and age.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like all our modern conveniences allow us to be lazier, right? The apps, the food gets delivered right to our house. We don't even have to get in the car nowadays to go and get it. You know, Almost everything is at the touch of a button. And we sit in cars to go to work. We sit at a desk and a computer most of our workday, and then the couch and the TV are our form of entertainment at night. And those three C's have no activity involved in them. So yeah, you have to really build it in to compensate for how our society operates nowadays, or otherwise you're just going to have that wrong balance between intake and lack of output, and that's what gets us in trouble.
What would you say to someone who's been sitting on the couch for a while? They're 30, 40 pounds overweight, and they go, I don't have time. I got running the kids to soccer. I work 8 hours a day. I got to cut the lawn after work. I don't have time for this, Mitch. I can't afford to buy all the healthy food because I'm feeding 4 kids. And what advice would you give to that guy?
Start small. It doesn't mean adopting the routine you think it does, the 5 day a week at the commercial gym, bodybuilder style, 6 meals a day in Tupperware. Like, that's not realistic. Maybe if you're trying to step on a bodybuilding stage, you go down that route eventually. But just start with those 10-minute micro walks. If you got meetings that don't require you to be on video, just pace around your office, or if you're at home, pace around your kitchen. All the little things add up,
Mhm.
and you've got to eat, so you might as well make a little bit better choices with your eating. It's not going to take more time. Control portions, even if it's not the healthiest options. Just trying to pack up half your meal at the restaurant before you eat the whole thing. Little
Mm.
tips go a long way, and it's just about becoming more aware of how much you're consuming and trying to scale that back a little bit, and how much you're moving and try to scale that up just a little bit.
Yeah, the compound effect, right? Have you read that
Mhm.
book, The Compound Effect?
I have. It's been ages. Yeah.
Yeah, but there's that story in there about the cookie guys. There's 3 guys, and one of them just takes up baking, right? And he decides he's going to moderate himself. He loves baking for his kids, but he's going to limit himself to 1 cookie a day, which is about 125 calories. Another guy decides he's going to take the cream out of his coffee because he wants to do a little calorie deficit, 125 calories, and the other guy makes no change at all. And in the first 3 to 6 months, there was very almost indiscernible difference. But after 18 months, there was a 67-pound gap between the guy who had the 125 calorie deficit and the guy who had 125 calorie excess. So one lost 35 pounds, the other one gained like 30 something pounds. So there's a
Hmm.
70-pound gap. And again, that's sort of the slow cooker effect of those small changes.
Totally.
So,
It's amazing how
yeah.
it adds. The
Yeah.
little changes, especially if you're starting from ground zero, yeah, taking the coffee out of your cream or swapping the sugar for a Splenda, something like that. It's a simple swap that's going to save, yeah, 50 to 100 calories a day, but add that up over a year, 365 days times 100. I'm not good at math, but that's quite a bit of calories saved, you know?
Yeah, well, I mean, if yeah. Yeah, that's a lot. I'm not also I do girl math. That's it. It's girl math. I took it back and I got money back, then that's free money and I can spend it on something else. So, what are your goals for your business, Mitch?
Well, I keep setting the bar higher as we grow, and ideally, it's impacting over 1 million lives in some capacity. Maybe that's not all one-to-one coaching. Frankly, the capacity we do have other coaches on our team now, but that limits what we can really help in terms of one-to-one. But in terms of products and other things, if I can have a small dent on the obesity crisis, we'll call it, then I'll be happy going forward into retirement. It's like ultimately, how many people can I help, like my former self, who are struggling, stuck, not sure where to start, just being that bridge to a better life and getting them to a place where they can sustain that on their own. Like that's the outcome I want for everybody that comes into our program in any capacity. So yeah,
And
setting the bar high.
I love that. I love that because I think, there's not we have enough people telling us what to do, but it's guys like you that are out there living it that inspire people. And inspiration, inspire versus require works for me. I get inspired by other people's actions and it makes me want to be a better person. It makes me want to step into my potential. If someone just tells me what to do, that doesn't do anything for me. But you having walked the talk, speaking so honestly about it, like it wasn't just so simple, it was up and down, and there's no hacks and all of that, that's an inspiration for so many. And if you leave a legacy around that it's really simple, not easy. That's what I hear from
Mm-hmm.
you. It's simple, but it's not easy. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that we have too many people looking for easy, and then it
Yeah,
gets complicated.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. The more easy, the more complex it tends to be, and that's marketing. I won't sugarcoat that it takes effort, but it's always worth the work, you know.
Yeah.
And we realize that on the other side, once you break through, it's pushing a boulder uphill at first, trying to create a new identity and developing habits that don't come easy. But then eventually you're pushing that boulder downhill and you're in a place where you can maintain and your life just becomes so much more fulfilling, but your quality of life improves substantially too. So
That's
it's
actually
just
one
getting
thing I
there.
just want to touch on before we sign off here. But I know from experience when I had surgery on my hip, I've moved every day. I've always been someone who exercised. So I didn't quite realize this until I wasn't allowed to exercise for 4 months. I was on crutches for a month. I couldn't do, and they were
Mhm.
like, you could do a little bit of weights with your upper body, but I mean, it's not the same. It's actually really easy to stay in shape. It's really
Mhm.
effing hard to get in shape, but I'd love to share that with people because, like, yeah, it is pushing that boulder uphill, but then you do get to this place where it's actually kind of like my body walks itself to the exercise
Yeah.
room because it's just such a habit. It's not hard, and I don't have to work out to the point of killing myself. Just got to get there and do the things, and you know. But when I was not exercising, getting back in shape, I was like, no wonder people are out of shape. This sucks.
Yeah, those first few workouts have crippling soreness from anything, right? And it's well, everyone's disciplined in their habits to start. It's just the wrong habits. And now it's just becoming like switching for those good habits, like you said, they're automatic for you now. They weren't on day one. They aren't for anyone on day one, but you keep pushing it, forcing it, maybe getting support to kind of help remind you of why it's important and get you adhering. And eventually, yes, it becomes this second nature ability. And that's when the magic happens. That's when you know you've won and there's no
Yeah.
going back.
Now I know that if you say that you're going to commit to something, there's about an 8% chance that you'll make that thing happen. If you say it out loud to other people, there's about a 35% chance that it'll happen. If you create 360-degree accountability by investing in yourself and showing up for that investment, it's 95% likely that your goal
Yeah.
will happen, right? So
Mhm.
how important is it for people to invest in a trainer, in a system, in support on a health journey? You said that you invested in a coach early on.
Yeah, and I still frankly do. If I have some specific pursuit in mind, I just do better with accountability with the
Yeah.
coach than without. It
Well,
just
you and I both belong to a coaching program for our businesses, right? I believe we got to invest in ourselves because I pay that much money. I'm going to show up and do the work.
That's half the equation is just how you show up differently when you have skin in the game. When
Yeah.
you pay attention and
Yeah.
you put in more work. There's that. But then there's the accountability and someone that's going to help troubleshoot
Yeah.
your plan, especially if you've been trying on your own, you keep getting caught and regaining the weight or getting stuck with your goals. Maybe there is something wrong in your application as well, but it's that combination of someone checking in, keeping you honest, and a proven path that someone's already walked that has a lot of the roadblocks kind of cleared for you. That's really the 1-2 punch. I think that really creates magic for people.
I love that. So, where can people find you, Mitch?
MitchCalvert.com. Very
Mhm.
creative with my business name, Calvert Fitness. I put my last name in Fitness, so I know what to do. Or Instagram.com/Mitch Calvert Fitness too. Love to
Okay.
connect with anybody.
Yeah, we'll put that in the show notes. And I just thank you so much for your honesty. And I love your approach to fitness. As I said, I've been in fitness a long time, and there's so much gobbledygook out there. And I love just your honesty, your straightforwardness, the truth of where you come from. And I believe you will leave a mark and a legacy. And it sometimes feels like you're standing, against the wind when there's all this stuff out there, and I know what it takes to kind of stand alone in the truth. And so I just really acknowledge you for that. That inspires me, and I wish you all the best in your business. And I'm sure you're going to serve a lot of people. So thanks for being here, Mitch.
Well, thanks for the interview. I mean, you're exceptional at it. The hour flew by. You really know what you're doing, so I appreciate your time.
Thank you.